Okay, Rav Dalit, about 10 lines or so. Rav Dalit Amar Aleph Boy Rabbi Oven. So we in the sugya of Trumas Hadeshin, since the Mishnah said that the first prize was for Trumas Hadeshin, so we have some talk about it. Yesterday's sugya was about if Kohen by a Tzos Hadeshin, if he wears 2 begadim or 4, and then the question was, does anybody hold that by Trumas Hadeshin it's enough to have 2 begadim? And we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan, you have to have 4 begadim, both for Tzos Hadeshin also. Now it doesn't even come to the question. It's Tzos Hadeshin, Trumas Hadeshin has to have 4 begadim, and a Kohen Balmum is puzzled for that also. So that's yesterday's sugya. And now the Gemara continues other halachas about the Trumas Hadeshin. Again, Trumas Hadeshin was not to remove the Deshin. That's called a Tzos Hadeshin when it gets full. So you take it out of the Beis HaMikdash to Mokom Tohar, but Shefach Hadeshin. But here there's so much daily avoda that you took off some Deshin from the Mizbeach and you walk down the ramp and you put it down on the east of the Mizbeach. It doesn't say Beferish Agav if it got swallowed up or not. It's interesting. Everyone knows that it got swallowed up. Now it doesn't say Beferish. Choices before a few pages ago when it spoke about the other point, Dishon Mizbeach HaPanimi, Dishon HaMenorah, and the Kli Cheres over there. That the Gemara says openly that it was Nivla'in, it got swallowed up. Here, this doesn't say about it. Tosfos just to point out, we didn't mention it last time, just to scroll back a second, on the Chav Beis, which Chav Beis, is that true? Where is the, maybe it was the Tosfos a second, the Nivla'in, I have my Gemara here. Of Chaf Aleph. And of Chaf Aleph, this place over here. So he says it wasn't simple if the Dishon Mizbeach HaChitzon was swallowed up or not, which he says, Raporos, I don't know his name, Raporos, he says, who are doing the Dishon Mizbeach HaChitzon? Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says he doesn't know. It doesn't mention it. The Gemara doesn't mention it, so it could be that it was not swallowed up. So even though Tosfos codes continue that it's possible, he answers the kashas, but just to make a point out of it, that the Gemara doesn't say openly in the place that the ashes of the Mizbeach HaChitzon were swallowed up. The Trumas Hadeshin that you put down next to the Mizbeach, maybe not. Interesting. Okay, but anyway, there's avoda every day that you take off some of the ashes and put it on the east of the Mizbeach. And I just want to say that I don't know what the avoda is. What are you doing exactly? You're taking off a little bit of the ashes. The Mizbeach is full of ashes, and you're taking off a little bit. We'll see today right away how much that is. Very little. And what did you do exactly? What is it symbolizing? What is the avoda that you're doing by taking off a little bit of ashes? It's also that we understand when the Mizbeach is ashes you have to take off. This daily service of taking off some Deshin off the Mizbeach. How much ashes do you have to take off? What's the shiur? What's the question? Because it says Vehirim. You should Vehirim Deshin. So the word Vehirim means to lift off, to separate some. So how much? And the question is, where do you learn it out from? Other places in the Torah where it says Lashon of Vehirim, and we'll learn out from there. Chumas Ma'aseh Alpin Allah, or Chumas Midyan Alpin Allah. Chumas Ma'aseh, it also says Lashon of Vehirim. Rashi brings the pasuk over there. They're supposed to take a Maaseh and a Maaseh, so it'll be a tenth. So maybe you have to take a tenth or whatever ashes you have on the Mizbeach. Yes, it's supposed to take off a tenth, or from Chumas Midyan. Over there it talks about when they got the spoils of Midyan, so it says they divided it. They between the people who went to the war and the rest of the people. And over there it says that they gave a meches. They gave a certain percentage to the Levium, to Allah. Over there it says they took 1 out of 500. The word over there, Barimosem, Rashi brings down, it says, Barimosem, Meches. Okay, I can't get it on here it is. Okay, I can't highlight it, but it says, Barimosem, Meches, Lashem, Echad Me'efesh, Mechamesh Meyos. So the two choices are a tenth or a 500. How much of the ashes that are on the Mizbeach that you have to do Trumas Hadeshin? Is it a tenth of that amount? Every day, it depends on how much ashes you have. A tenth of the amount, the proportion, or 1 out of 500. Tashma, the Gemara brings a brisa that says not like either choices. We offer two possibilities, and the Gemara finds a brisa that says a third choice, and that's what we're going to pass. We find the word vehirim by a komas. A komas is a fistful. So too over here, that's the halacha that how much ashes you have to take off Trumas Hadeshin, a fistful. Of course, you don't use your fist. Rashi says it's burning ashes. You don't put your fist in it. You do use a cleat, but that's the minimum amount. Of course, you let on more because you can't You can't measure. There's no reason to measure. You could have also a measuring cup that has the size of a fist, but you don't have to. You can put more if you want to. By regular Maisa, we say sometimes you can't do more because Masrosim Mukukolin. But here, there's no problem to put more. So that's the end of the sugya, very short sugya. How much is Truma Sadeshan? The answer is a Malo Kometz. And you learn out from Xer Shava that the word Truma is going to be a fistful. New sugya. That sugya is over. So again, it makes it even a little bit more curiosity. What is the avodah that you're doing? What are you doing exactly? Taking off a fistful of ashes from the mizbeach and putting it on the eastern side of the mizbeach, gets swallowed up, or it doesn't get swallowed up. What did you do exactly? So I'm at a loss. The new Gemara starts. Amirav. The next thing is going to be if a non-Kohen would do Truma Sadeshan is a Chayv Misa. In general, a non-Kohen, a Zor, Karev, you must, the Gemara is moving the pasuk soon, that if a non-Kohen does avod, he's Chayv Misa. It happens to be interesting machlokes in Sanhedrin. Does it mean Chayv Misa is Bezdin, or does it mean Chayv Misa b'dei Shamayim? I think it's only machlokes that exists. That is sometimes there's machlokes that someone's Chayv punishment, which capital punishment, and sometimes there's such things called Chayv Misa b'dei Shamayim, that a heavenly, that they'll die early, before his time. But here, there's one machlokes that exists if it's someone's capital punishment or Misa b'dei Shamayim. Very fascinating machlokes. But here we're going to talk about some things that are exceptions that a Kohen, that a non-Kohen, that's a certain avodah, she's not Chayv Misa. So, and our main point is going to be Truma Sadeshan. It's going to be revolving around our issue, even though yesterday we had that there's a possibility that you don't need a Kohen who's a Tom, he could be a Balmum maybe, he might be a Kohen as a blemish, or he doesn't have to have all big dekuna. But our Gemara is going to talk about it is a Zar Chayv Misa. It sounds like for sure a non-Kohen is not supposed to be doing it, even if you hold that a Balmum, a blemish Kohen may, but a Zor may not. And the whole question is going to be, is he Chayv Misa if he does? Amirav. So the sugi starts over here. Amirav. Arba avodah Zor Chayv V'lein Misa. There are only four services that a non-Kohen will Chayv Misa for. And we're going to go to the whole sugya. It comes in because of Truma Sadeshan, but now we're going to get involved in the whole criteria. What is a Zor Chayv for? What is a non-Kohen Chayv for? So he says the only four avodas that he's Chayv Misa for: Zrika, Haktara, Nisach Hamayim, and Nisach Hayayin. Zrika means putting the blood on the mizbeach. Haktara means burning on the mizbeach. Nisach Hamayim means the libations of water, which was only on Sukkot. That was Nisach Hamayim was only libations of water on the mizbeach on Sukkot, and Nisach Hayayin is the daily avoda of libations of wine on the mizbeach. And those are the things you're Chayiv for. Levi Yoma af Truma Sadeshan. That's the main point that Rav says Truma Sadeshan not. If a Zohar would have done Truma Sadeshan, he would have taken off the ashes off the mizbeach to put next to the mizbeach, the Truma Sadeshan. A Zohar is not Chayiv Misa. Levi says yes, even that he's Chayiv Misa also. Levi also said so on the Brisa af Truma Sadeshan. So machlokes. That's what we come down to. That if a Zohar not going to the Truma Sadeshan, is he Chayiv Misa or not? The one wants to know this first now. Where do they get the source? Not the source, what the source is. Where do they get it from? My time of the Rav. Where does Rav get his halacha from? That there's no chiyuv misa for Truma Sadeshan. Tichsiv pasuk says, but I think the pasuk is Korach. But uvanecha itcha. It's a long pasuk. This pasuk is going to be about 4 lines over here. It's a very long pasuk. Okay, I can't highlight it again. Maybe this one will help. This highlighter over here. But uvanecha itcha. Tishmeru eskun aschem l'chol devar ha-mizbeach u'libeis la-paroches v'abadatem. Avodas matana. Let's stop here because that's where the comma is between those two words. Avodas matana tein askun aschem v'azor ha'karev yumas. We'll be coming back to this pasuk a lot, so maybe we'll leave it highlighted. Okay, so this is the pasuk. Vata, and you and your children together with you, that's Aaron and his children. Tishmeru eskun aschem l'chol devar ha-mizbeach u'libeis la-paroches v'abadatem. You should guard your kahuna for all issues of the Mizbeach and within the Parochas, which is the Kodesh HaKadoshim. What's the Parochas? The Parochas divide between the Kodesh and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So Mizbeach Parochas means inside the Parochas means the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and you should serve. It's very interesting that the pasuk talks about the Mizbeach, which is outside in the courtyard, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim. It leaves out the middle, that the regular Heichal, the sanctuary where there was, we call it the Kodesh, that was the menorah and the Mizbeach HaPanimi, the golden altar, and shulchan for the bread. It doesn't talk about it. The pasuk talks about Dvar Mizbeach, which means probably the outside Mizbeach, and inside the Parochas. The Gemara doesn't talk about the Heichal itself and the sanctuary itself. But just to read the pasuk, you and your sons together with you should guard your kahuna for all the issues of the Mizbeach and inside the Parochas and serve. Avodas matana teines kunaschem v'azar karev yumas. I gave your kahuna as avodas matana. The pasuk Avodas matana might mean I'm not sure what the Pashup Pshat is. I didn't look into it. The Gemara is going to talk about that as an avoda of giving, that your kuna is you'll be giving. You do a service of giving. The Pashup Pshat might mean maybe that it's a present to you, but I'm not going to talk about that if that's the Pashup Pshat, because the Gemara is interested in avodas matana means that it's an avoda of placing. The word matana means like v'nasan, to give. And that's going to be the main thing about the Trumas Hadeshin. Trumas Hadeshin, you're not giving. Trumas Hadeshin, you're taking. It's called avoda siluk, that you're going to be removing from the mizbech. So this is the pasuk that says that Azar Kurv. You must reread the whole pasuk. This is the pasuk where it says that a non-Kohen that does avoda is he approaches the mizbech. He approaches Azar Korev. A non-Kohen who approaches is going to be put to death. You must, as we said, either means by Bezdin or means by heaven. But anyway, this is the pasuk of the Chi of Misa for a non-Kohen who does the avoda. And the Gemara is going to dash from the pasuk. Avodas matana, avodah siluk. That's the main point we want to talk about. That when it says avodas matana, so it means a service of placing, but not a service of removing. And Trumas Hadeshin is the service of removing. And therefore, Rav says there's no chid misa on that. There's another drasha coming in, which the Gemara is going to deal with also. It's not our subject, but once we mention the pasuk, there's another drasha that it says va'avatem. This word over here, va'avatem, is also a drasha. So there are two drashas. One is avodas matana. That's what we just said, that it means only if you place, not if you remove. And also the pasuk that said va'avatem. So that's coming to also teach us something. Avodah tama. The fact that a lot of times when it says this kind of word, like uchasav tam, it means ksiva tama. There are other drashas like this. Sometimes there are different drashas that it says the drasha of top mem at the end of the word. So even though in the Hebrew is no problem, it means you, plural. But the Gemara dashins that it means tam. Tam means complete. So when it says va'avatem, it means avodah tama. That's the drasha. Avodah tama means it should be a complete avodah. What's complete avodah? The law avodah sheish avodah. Not if it's the middle of a service. It means there are some services that even though it's a service, but it's not the end of there's a series that you have to do the whole thing. The easiest example would be in the beginning we said about zrika. So zrika is an example of something that you are chayiv for. Azar be chayiv for doing zrika. And Rashi points out that everything leading up until there is not chayiv. Is shchita, kabbalah, holacha, zrika. That in order to get the blood, to do the zrika, you have to slaughter the animal in order to get the blood, and then you receive the blood, and then you take the blood to the mizbech, and then you throw it. So everything else is considered avoda. Avoda. It's an avoda which is not finished. Only the zrika is the end of that series. Then there are other kinds of avodas. You have to put a varm on the mizbech and burn it, haktorah. But it is a series of avodas. So here, this is the drasha. Since it says va'avatem, so we learn out avodah tama. It has to be a complete service, which means it's the last thing. It's the end of the avodah of that series. The law avodah sheish avodah. So we learn two halachas. One is one is our subject, one is not our subject. Our subject was avodas matana, that it has to be that you're placing, and therefore Trumas Hadeshin is removing. So Rav says you're not chayiv for that. You're not supposed to, but you're not chayiv. It's not chayiv misa. And va'avatem, a side point, there's only an avodah tama. Only if it's the end of the series, it's completing that avodah. But if it will be avodah which still has other avodas to do to complete, so then it wouldn't be chayiv. So
why did Rashi add the word mitchamemes after gomeris? What does he mean by that?
Gomeris means to finish. Also, I don't know why he has to say two. Gomeris is to explain to us, and mitchamemes is to fit it into the word avodah tama. Avodah tama means that it's complete, that it finishes off. He wants to put it into the words. I think if the Gemara would have said avodah gemura, then Rashi would have said gomeris. But since it says avodah tama, so he wanted to explain that it completes the thing. But mitchamemes says it completes it, the completion. It finishes and completes. So that's the 2 points. What's going to get to us right now at this point is only one about avodas. The other one is not. The Gemara is going to talk about it very much about the second drasha, that it should be complete, ending. But what we need right now is avodas matana, that it's a placing and not a removing. So that's Rav's source. That Trumas Hadeshin is removing, and therefore the Zohar is not chayiv misa. Not supposed to do it, but it's not chayiv misa. What does Levi do? The Levi. What does Levi? How could Levi say that you are chayiv for removing the deshen? The answer is Rabbi Rachmana l'chol dvar mizbeach. In the beginning of the pasuk, it says a riboy l'chol dvar mizbeach. So that l'chol dvar mizbeach is coming to say any issue on the mizbeach, even removing. The Gemara at this point doesn't say what does he do with the point of avodas matana. Sometimes it's mashma that has to be given. The Gemara is going to eventually, as soon as we turn the page, we're going to say that Levi agrees. Sometimes if you remove a removal act, is not chayiv. But this pasuk l'chol dvar mizbeach says as far as the mizbeach goes, it's chayiv even if it's removing. So Trumas Hadeshin is done on the mizbeach. So even though it's removing, Levi says chayiv. That's this word over here. Levi, Rabbi Yachman l'chol dvar mizbeach. The pasuk of l'chol dvar mizbeach is coming to include that even Trumas Hadeshin, even though it's removing, also the Zohar is chayiv. What does Rav do with this word l'chol dvar mizbeach? It's an extra word. Rav ha'hu la'asui yeshava azor shebefnim v'shebim mitzorah. There are other avodas that we might have thought that you potter, and Rav says this pasuk of the Chol Dvar Mizbech is coming to include them, and those are seven sprinklings inside, and those are the mitzvah. So Rashi says that when it says in the first white line in Rashi, Shavazor Shavifnim, he says that you sprinkle on the parochas. You're inside the Heichal, and it says Par Elam Dova, Par Kon Mashiach, also Yom Kippur. There are many times, 3 times that Rashi brings down that you go into the Heichal and you sprinkle. He says one is by Par Elam Dova, that's if the Tzibur made a mistake and they have to bring a korban for the whole Tzibur. They did Avera, that's Chai for korban chatas. Par Mashiach, if the Kohen Gadol did a chet, that's Chai for korban chatas. Yom Kippur, as we know, that's what we're learning about. There's going to be Hazos on the parochas, Achas Lamal Sheb Lamata, and then also Sheb Mitzorah. So that says by Mitzorah, part of the service of purifying is Shamaz and Lug Shemen. That is Lug Shemen, and he also sprinkles from the Shemen towards the Heichal. And Rashi says the Heichal. That's not so simple. Rashi says that for the Mitzorah, the Kohen goes into the Heichal and he sprinkles from the oil inside the Heichal. That's not so simple. The Rishash points out over here that other Rishonim Magi on Rashi, and maybe the Arayis from different Gemaras. But just to point out, that's not so simple. But Rashi says that for the Mitzorah, it's a fascinating thing. The Mitzorah would realize how serious Avera he did, that they're going into the Heichal in order to sprinkle the part of his purification process. But anyway, Rav says that you need a pasuk to be marba, that these things are also chayiv. If a zar would do these things, if a non-Kohen would do the sprinkling in the Heichal for the Par Elam Dova, Par Kohen Mashiach, or Yom Kippur, he thinks he became a Kohen Gadol all of a sudden, and he's doing the avodah inside the Heichal, so also he's chayiv for that. Why you might think that he's not. Rashi says you might consider it's not called Dvar Mizbeach, and the truth is that it's not in the Mizbeach, it's inside. So L'chol Dvar Mizbeach, that riboy, Rav says we use the riboy of L'chol Dvar Mizbeach to tell us that you chayiv on these things. Levi also agrees. The Levi, he agrees to these drushes of Sheva Azos, Sheva Fnim, Sheva Mitzorah. Where does he learn it out from? He already needs the pasuk to tell you for even if it's avoda siluk, even though it's removing something on the Mizbeach, still a chayiv. Nafkalei midevar v'chol devar. There's many extra words. It could have said the whole thing of Dvar Mizbeach is extra, and then it says v'chol devar Mizbeach. So he learns out 2 drushes. One is for the 7 azos shebifnim and for Mitzorah, and also that on the Mizbeach it's chayiv even if it's going to be avodas siluk. But Rav says Rav devar v'chol devar lo dorish. Rav doesn't feel that it's that nuance is enough to make a drusha out of it. That's the way the pasuk talks. So you have no extra drusha. So at this point the Gemara finished with the not finished, but we have machlokus now. Rav and Levi is a non-Kohen chayiv for taking off the deshen, taking off the ashes of the mizbeach, Trumas HaDeshen, even though it's an avodah siluk. As a general rule, Rav said that you're not chayiv for removing, only for placing. Here he's not placing, he's removing. And Levi says on the mizbeach he chayiv for that also. The Gemara says kasha, 4 lines from the bottom. The Ema. The Gemara is asking kasha on Levi. The Ema l'chol dvar mizbeach klal, avodas matana prat, klal prat, Ema chal l'mashe b'prat, avodas matana in, avodas siluk lo. If you agree that the word avodas matana means placing and not removing, so if you have a klal prat means, what do you say? What did Levi answer? That l'chol dvar mizbeach is coming to include that he's chayiv even though it's removing. But if right after that it says avodas matana, which Levi agrees, the Gemara is asking avodas matana means placing, not removing. So it says klal prat, and you're not entitled to make an extra drush out of that. When you have a klal prat, even though the pasuk does say l'chol dvar mizbeach, but ein b'chlal ela mashe b'prat. When you have such a kind of a setup in the pasuk, sort of pattern of having a generality and then having a specific, so the generality is not going to be marred by anything more than is included in the prat. So since it says avodas matana, which means only placing and not removing, so l'chol dvar mizbeach is not a valid riboy to include even more. Only avodas matana and nothing else. Even on the mizbeach also you shouldn't be chayiv if you remove the deshen. The my answer is Amar Krua ulami beis laparoches. Just that this possible beis laparoches that it says in between. If you notice, it says the chol dvar mizbeach, and the more answer that's a cloud, and then it says avodas matana, which is a prat, klal of prat, and the more answers there's a word in between. Ulami beis laparoches, and therefore the prat and klal is not called the klal of prat. There's something interrupting in between. So the din that the chol dvar mizbeach ulami beis laparoches is on the mizbeach is going to even be if it's removing. Trumas HaDeshen is also chayiv. When is this? But he does agree. That's what's going to come out now. That Levi also agrees that you only chayiv sometimes if you place and don't remove. What's that going to be? Only based on parochas. If it's inside in the Kodesh HaKadoshim over there, Levi agrees that if you remove something, you're not chayiv. You only chayiv for placing. But he had an extra ribuy to say that on the mizbeach outside over there you're chayiv even if you remove. Omar Kra, but Levi answers. Only based on parochas. They can take this word about them is not necessary at this point. Just we want only based on parochas. And the base of Baruch is who that avodas matana v'lo avodas siluk. I agree that there's such a time that you only chayiv for placing and not removing. That's when it's inside the parochas. Rashi says, where is there a case inside the parochas that you remove? When do you ever remove anything from inside the Kodesh HaKodashim? So Rashi tells us on Yom Kippur that in the service of Yom Kippur, at one point he brought the Ketores inside, and he had to leave it over there that it burned. He had the fire pan with the Ketores that was burning, and also the Kli that he brought that had the Ketores originally. He left it in the Kodesh HaKodashim. And then there was all avodah to do, bringing the blood of the fire, the blood of the sore. Eventually, he had to also take out. He doesn't leave the kelim over there for the rest of the year. He has to take it out. That's called avodah siluk. Rashi says, just to see the Rashi in the third line, taking out the cup that had the Torah, which he already used. He took it out, he burnt it. And also the machta, that's the fire pan that has the coals in it. You have to take it out. We're going to see later on that's going to be when he changes his clothing for a second time. There's a big day Zav, big day Lavan, big day Zav, big day Lavan, big day Zav. So the big day Lavan day does twice. The second time, big day Lavan is only to remove the Tzos Kaf Machta. He goes to the Kodesh HaKodashim a second time just to remove the Kaf Machta that he left there before. But anyway, that's called a siluk. What if a non-Kohen would do that? How do you get in there? I don't know. But a non-Kohen went into the Kodesh HaKodashim to take out the Kaf Machta. So he's not Chayiv Misa. He's not Chayiv Misa because it's avodah siluk, and even Levi agrees that on avodah siluk, on an avodah of removing, you're not Chayiv based on parochas. But he said, and the Var Mizbeach, if it's on the Mizbeach, then he's Chayiv also. So it comes out we're still bad. The same machlok, only one machlok is Rav and Levi. If the Trumas Hadashin is Chayiv, if a non-Kohen does Trumas Hadashin, over there Levi says that the Chol Var Mizbeach is coming to include that on the Mizbech he's chayiv even if it's avodah siluk, but he agrees that inside the Kodesh HaKodashim, if a non-Kohen is going to do avodah siluk, he's not chayiv misa. It's amazing. He's not supposed to do it. I don't know what they're going to do to him, but he's not going to be chayiv misa for doing the avodah. The Gemara Kasha, Iyachi, now we're going back to the drasha we mentioned that we didn't talk about too much. That there's also a different drasha about avodah tem. We said avodah tama. Our main subject was about revolving around the Trumas Hadashim, which was about asila, avodah spadana. But we also mentioned there's another drasha avodah tama, avodah sheishach avodah. That only if you did a complete avodah, that's end of the series, not the middle of the series. That still has what to do after. And the Gemara is asking, Levi, are you going to say that only applies based on parochas? Are you going to say that condition that you're not chayiv on an avodah only if it's the end of the series, but if it's in the middle, then you're not chayiv? Are you going to say that only applies inside the parochas and not outside? The same way that they say avodah siluk is chayiv outside in the courtyard, are you going to say that even avodah which is not finished is also going to be chayiv outside? That's the third line. Yachiv avodah tem. That drasha of avodah tem, avodah tama. Nami, are you going to say dafka mibeis parochas? And mibeis parochas who avodah tama avodah sheish achra avodah, but b'chutz afil avodah sheish achra avodah? Are you going to say that if he did avodah outside, even if it's not a full series, like we talk about shchita, kabbalah, not shchita, zakadu, but kabbalah, holacha, are you going to say all those things that even though it's not an end of the avodah is chayiv because it's outside? Don't you agree to what that he agreed? Only you argued on Trumas Hadashin. My answers about a tem, there's extra pasuk over there about a tem to say that halacha is not concerning only the base of parochas, like the pasuk says, avodas matanate about a tem. So when it said the din of about a tem, over there we don't say that it's only going about the base of parochas. The truth is that the pasuk, the way it's arranged, is very different how the Gemara uses it. It comes out that avodas matana is according to Levi, avodas matana, that it placing and not removing is only the base of parochas. And but then the Mizbech is chayiv even not. About the tem is going even on the whole Dvar Mizbech. I don't get the arrangement of the pasuk according to the way the Gemara is mentioning it. It doesn't. The drushes don't seem to be according to the order of the pasuk. But that's how it comes out. Just as far as the halachas go so far, there's no machlokes. Everybody, only one point of Trumas Hadashin. Everybody agrees that in general there are two miutim, two things that make a person not chayiv misa. One is if it was removing. If you remove something, even in the Kodesh HaKodashim, if you removed it, he's potter. Only if you placed. And even placing is only chayiv if it was the last of the series, there was nothing else to do after that. But if it was the middle of the series, it's potter. It's only inside, outside, there's only one machlokes. Only about removing outside. That's Trumas Hadashin. That's the thing of Trumas Hadashin. That's one machlokes. Rav says also, if you remove, you're not chayiv. And Levi says, and that one thing, the Chol Dvar Mizbech is coming to include that Trumas Hadashin, the Zohar is chayiv for taking off the Dashin off the Mizbech. Boy Rava, about 10 lines down, 3, 6, whatever, 7. Boy Rava. Avodah siluk behechal mahu. So we pointed out when we learned the pasuk over here that the pasuk is interesting. It talks about the two extremes. It talks about the mizbeach outside, and it talks about based on paruch, the kodesh hakadoshim. It doesn't talk about the heichal, the sanctuary itself. The middle between them, it's outside the kodesh hakadoshim, but it's inside the building. That it's not outside on by chol devar mizbeach. How about that? And the Gemara is asking on Levi, that Levi who says there's a difference if it's inside or outside. According to Rav, there's no difference. Rav says all over there's a ptor if avoda silok, there's a ptor if it's not avoda tama. But Levi holds there's a difference because he says avoda silok inside the kodesh hakadoshim is pater, outside by the mizbech is chayiv. How about the heichal itself? If somebody removes something from the heichal, is that going to be included in the ptor that it's not avodas matana, or maybe it's like the outside, the chol devar mizbeach? So that's the most question. Rashi gives examples. What would the question? What would the application of this question be? He says dishin mizbeach hapinimi or dishin menorah. If somebody would take out the ashes off the menorah, clean off the menorah, Yisrael, the non-Kohen, is gonna clean out the menorah, so it's called avodah siluk. He's removing from the heichal, or if you would take off the ashes off the mizbeach hapinimi, the inner altar. Is Levi going to say he's pater like in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, or is chayiv like on the Mizbeach HaChitzam? That's a Rab's question, because the pasuk doesn't say about it. Avodah siluk v'heichal now. Lefnim midamin Allah. Do we compare it to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is pater for removing something, or lechutz midamin Allah? Do we compare it to outside, which is chayiv for removing something? Chumas hadeshin. Other pashta. Then he himself answered the question. Midbeis ulu midbeis. It could have said midbeis because it says ulu midbeis. Let's go back to the pasuk again. It says. The chol devar mizbeach ulami base. So it's extra. The above lamed over there, the highlighting didn't get it. It could have said mi base. Why does it say ulami base? So Rashi says it's coming to include more in mi base la parochas. Not only literally inside the parochas, whatever's outside is also secondary. It's also considered part of that. And therefore he says that the Torah of removing something from the kodesh hakadoshim also applies to removing something from the heichal. And therefore, if someone would do cleaning off the menorah, cleaning off the inner altar, also a zar would be pater. So again, we left with only one machlokes. Chumas hadeshin is only machlokes between Rav and Levi. The Gemara continues now, and for practical purposes, it's really no difference between Rav and Levi anymore. We're going to come back to Rav and Levi, this machlokes about Chumas hadeshin. But once we mention that the heichal is considered also there's a chiyuv of Azar doing avodah. The pasuk didn't talk about it. Talk about the mizbeach, talk about the kodesh hakadoshim, but we just finished saying that it applies to the heichal also. There's a ptor also, the avodah siluk, is pater inside. But if he would place something, so then he would be chayiv even in the heichal. So the Gemara now is going to talk about everybody, not Rav, Levi, everybody. That after Rav told us that the heichal is also included in the chiyuv, the liability of a non-kohen who's going to do avodah in the heichal. So the Gemara has more questions. Rav said only 4, Zrika, Torah, and then the Nisach HaMayim, Nisach HaYayin, and Levi only added on Chumas hadeshin. But the Gemara says why there are not many more avodas that is all will be chayiv for. Elamiyata Zor Shesida V'Sashulchan L'chayiv. What if the non-Kohen would set up the table with the bread? That's supposed to be an avodah for the Kohen. And what if a non-Kohen is going to do it? The Gemara thinks that you're placing it, you're not removing it, you're placing it, and it's inside the heichal. You tell me heichal is chayiv also, not only the mizbeach and the kodesh hakadoshim, the heichal is also chayiv as long as you're placing it. So here I'm placing it. So if and Rav didn't say that. Rav just said zrika, Torah, nisach hamayim, nisach. He didn't say about arranging the bread on the shulchan. The Gemara answers because it's not the end of the series. Something goes after that. You can see the bazichin. After you put the bread, you're supposed to also put the bazichin. Bazichin are 2 cups of levona that goes on the shulchan also. And after you put the bread, you're supposed to put the levona onto the shulchan, onto the table. So you didn't finish. It's in the middle of a series. The Gemara says, okay, I will see the bazichin chayiv. If you for putting the cups of levona, you should be chayiv because now it's finished. No, it's also not finished. Iko siluk faktor. At the end of the week means he puts it on Shabbos, but then it waits the whole week, and then next Shabbos he's supposed to remove it and be makted the levona on the mizbeach. He burned the levona on the mizbeach to Hashem. The bread's given out to the kohen, but the bazichin go to the Torah goes the bazichin levona go on the mizbeach. So therefore, it's not finished yet. Putting it on the mizbeach is not finished because you still have to take it off next week and burn it. And when you burn it, you are chayiv. That's what he said. Aktorah. What did Rav say? Zrika, Aktorah, Nisach HaMayim. So the Aktorah, so burning the levona is going to be chayiv. But anything you do on leading up until there is not chayiv. The next question is, how about if the Zohar Shesida Menorah? So the Gemara is going to say the whole order of how you light the menorah. So Rashi says, first of all, when you clean out the menorah from yesterday's oil and wick. That's in the morning. Hatavas haneros. We had hatavas shteineros, hatavas chomesh neros. So you clean out the menorah. Rashi points out that the menorah, the lamps itself on top of the menorah, they were removable. That it wasn't like I don't know how people picture it. That cup of oil, the golden cup, a nair. There's neros, so the nair is the cup, and that is sitting on a platform. The 7 platforms on the 7 branches of the menorah, and it's removable. And when you would want to clean it, you take off the whole cup, and you empty out the leftover oil and wicks and the ashes, whatever was there, and you clean it out, and you put it back on. And then you're going to put in the oil and the wicks and eventually light it. So that's the Gemara's kasha. The first question is that arranging the cups on the menorah is also, the Gemara is asking, it's considered an avoda. I'm surprised that it's considered an avoda. It doesn't say to do it every day. It says to make a menorah, put it in the heichal. But the Gemara is considering that arranging the cups of the lamps, the cups that go on top of the menorah, you take it off. Taking it off is avoda siluk, but putting it back on again, you should be chayiv for. And the Gemara says the reason why you're not chayiv, the zor, is because you still didn't finish. You have to put in the oil and the wicks, continues. But it's interesting that the Gemara considers arranging the menorah is also considered an avoda. And he's supposed to have a kohen dafka. That's interesting. I wouldn't have known that. So it says, why is as non-kohen who arranges the menorah, why is he not chayiv? The answer is because it's not finished. It's a avoda. It's not a avoda tama. It's not a complete because you have to finish it. You can see this psila. You have to put the wick into it afterwards. What's the purpose of putting the menorah? Only Asia light it. So you have to put the wick. Okay, how about if the Zara puts the wick? That's not psila chayv. No, because you have to put the oil. You can see the shemen. You have to put the oil afterwards, so it's not finished yet. Okay, how about if you put the shemen? That's not shemen l'chayv. No, you have to light it. You got laka. So okay, if you light it, you should be chayv. There's a lot of Gemara. Hidlik l'chayv. Be chayv if you light the menorah. If a non-kohen lights the menorah, it should be chayv because you didn't have avodah and it's finished. So I don't know what the answer is. Adlaka lava avodah. It's not considered an avodah. So the Gemara doesn't explain. The Gemara doesn't explain, and even more interesting is that the Gemara doesn't think it has to explain. If anybody could help me here, why is Adlaka not an avodah? Why not? Why that doesn't explain? Adlaka lava avodah. Everything else, the Gemara has a problem. Everything is an avodah. It has an avodah afterwards. Putting the lamp, that's an avodah, but it's not finished. And putting the wick also is an avodah, but you have to put putting the shem also an avodah. But lighting it is not an avodah. It is the end, but it's not considered an avodah. I have no idea why the luck is not an avodah. If anybody could help me, I would appreciate it.
But he can't do all these things.
He's not allowed to.
He's not allowed
The
to.
Rambam, interesting. What Moshe is asking, how about is he allowed to? The Moshe says not an avodah. The Rambam says that the chatchila, a non-kohen is allowed to light the menorah. He just says there's a technicality, you can't go into the heichal.
Right.
So then if he says if you bring out the menorah, you'd be allowed to light it. So they talk about it. But that's interesting. Without the Rambam, I would have thought that you're not allowed to do it. But if he did, he's not chayv misa. But the Rambam says he's allowed to do it even lachatchila. But I don't understand. I don't begin to understand why it's not an avodah. Without any explanation, it's not an avodah. So if anybody thinks of anything or comes up with anything or sees anything,
Posner had an arichas about it. He had an arichas about it, but the only thing I can remember that's relevant, but you still need a hesber, is that the mitzvah was that it was in a status of being lit, but not that the actual lighting was. And that also frees up the zar because there's a okimta that they could have stuck out a long candle or whatever, because Mehekatesi removed the menorah bechal to bring it outside to where a zar could light it. So there's a whole discussion around these things. And if I remember correctly, the bottom line was that there's a mitzvah that it's in a status of being lit, but it's not an avoda because there's not actually a mitzvah to light it somehow. I don't know why it's not an avoda though. I definitely.
Balos chas haneros. Okay, balos chas. That's what the pasuk is. Pashas balos chas haneros. Amul pnei amnavay yimushevas haneros. So what he's saying that the mitzvah is only that it should be lit, but not that you should light it. Okay, interesting. The Gemara's the kasha here. You have to see if that's going to fit with what the Gemara says now. The Gemara's the kasha, lighting it is not an avodah, but lo is lighting the menorah not a avodah. But Tanya, the nasnu b'nei avona koyin eish alam mizbeach v'achu eitzim aleish. The Gemara's comparing lighting the fire on the mizbeach to lighting the menorah. So I would ask on Rav Rosner that here it says v'nasni. Here it says you should put a fire. By the menorah it doesn't. But the Gemara sees that's all the same. So I don't. He would have to explain this also. The Gemara's the kasha. The Gemara thought at least that was a kasha. I don't know, maybe that's going to be the answer. The Gemara says lighting the fire on the mizbeach is considered an avodah. The Yasa, Rashi says, means the twigs. When you make the mizbeach, the arrange the wood on the mizbeach, also you'd make a place for twigs where the light catches on fire easily. And when you would want to light it, you would light it from that place. So it says that you need a kohen, kosher kohen, and also klishavis. Rashi means the big dekun. He has to be wearing his begadim. If not, he's not considered kosher kohen. And you do need a kohen to light the fire. So that's the kasha. if you say lighting the fire is a kosher, you need a Kohen, so how come lighting the menorah not? The Gemara answers, it's a difference. It's different. The Gemara doesn't explain. So maybe a person is going to say that there it says v'nasnu, and here it doesn't say. Here it says baloscha. Maybe, but the Gemara thinks we're very smart, and the Gemara doesn't think it has to explain. It says Allah avoda. We're supposed to understand why.
It's actually making the Hatsasa apparently was making an actual difference in the ability to make the korban. In other words, it was being mosif something that was significant to the Maisa korban.
Yes.
That's what I understood.
Surely lighting the menorah is also very significant. The whole purpose of the menorah is that it should be lit. But you're saying that because the mitzvah is not to light it, is that it should be lit. That's a very adin, a very delicate difference. Of course, the purpose of the menorah is that it should be lit. But you're saying not the actual lighting. But the chila between the fire of the mizbeach, also the purpose of the fire of the mizbeach that it should be lit and burn the. But the Gemara says that putting the fire is an avoda. We can talk about if there's an avoda after that or not. But here it says that it is an avoda. You need a kohen. We didn't talk about if it's chayv enough. A non-kohen is chayv, but it's considered an avoda. And here we're saying that lighting the menorah is not an avoda, and the Gemara doesn't feel necessary to explain the difference. Okay, fine, we got it. The Gemara is the kasha next. More conscious about why is zor not chayv. Till now we spoke about two examples that's inside the heichal, and we mentioned that the connection of the Gemara was that once you say that the heichal is also chayiv, so how about these cases, the menorah, the shulchan, the menorah? Now we're going outside into the courtyard again, and we have more conscious. How come these things are not chayiv? L'chara, this has nothing to do with Rav or anybody. This is already conscious in general. How come Rav only said 4? Levi added on a 5th. He added on about the Trumas Hadeshin, but everything else is not chayiv. Let's go out into the courtyard. How about arranging the wood? How come arranging the wood on the mizbech is not chayiv? Why is the zor not chayiv? If you arrange the wood, the answer is that's something after they're supposed to put on two new logs. We had a struggle that the 2 new logs were nama by nama, and a question how thick it's supposed to be. But what he does is he arranges whatever wood is still on the mizbech from yesterday's fire. It might be very charred and in the middle of being burnt, but once it went out, so now you take whatever wood is left and you arrange it, and then you put on 2 new logs every day, 2 shnei gizriyetsim. So therefore, you're not chayiv for arranging the wood because you have to do that after that. There's an avodah putting the 2 new logs of wood. Okay, so let him be chayiv on that. See the shnei gizriyetsim, let him be chayiv. The answer is equal see the evorim. That after that's also not considered finished yet because after that they would put the evorim of the korban that were not yet burnt. In the way it says it in Mishnah Yisrael, it sounds like it's going on yesterday's korban. Anything that was not yet burnt from yesterday's korban is overnight. So then they removed it, set up the fire, set up the wood, and the new 2 logs, and then they put the evorim on top. Afterwards, they lit it. But some Rashi here seems to say that's talking about the korban olah of today. But whatever it is, the point is that it's not considered a separate avodah, just arranging the logs, even with the 2 new logs, because putting on the limbs, the evorim that are supposed to be burnt, that's considered a continuation of that avodah. So you're not chayiv for putting on the 2 logs. And for the Seder evorim, that's going to be eventually the Aktorah if you're going to burn it. If there's going to be burning the Seder evorim, and then it's not chayiv until he lights it, until he burns it. So then the Aktorah you are chayiv. The Moshe Kasha, you're telling me that you're not chayiv for the Seder Shnei Gizriyetsim, but so what's happening? You told me a second ago that the Shnei Gizriyetsim was not chayiv because it's still in the middle of the avodah because you have to put the limbs on top of the wood. But Rabbi Yochanan says you are chayiv. So the Moshe says you're right. There's a machlokas going on. Oh, pligi, that's really the machlokas. Ma'asav avodah tamli, ma'asav avodah tamli. There's machlokas Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Rav says you're not chayiv. Rav said only 4 things: Zrika, Aktorah, Nesach Hamayim, Nesach Hayayin. He didn't say about arranging the Shnei Gizriyetsim. Why? Because he holds that that's not yet finished. It's not avodah tama because you still have to put the limbs on top, and it's considered a hemshech. It's considered a continuation of the arranging the wood and putting on the limbs on top. And Rabbi Yochanan holds that's a new series. One series is getting wood ready, and Shnei Gizriyetsim would be the end of that avodah tama. Then there's a new thing to put the evorim on top. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, you would be chayiv. So it comes out of machlokes. So we have 2 machlokes in today. One was about Trumas Hadeshin, which is avodah siluk outside in the Zohar. Rav holds Pater Levi holds chayiv. Another one was the Seder Shnei Gizriyetsim to put the 2 logs of wood. Again, Rav holds Pater, but Rabbi Yochanan is one who holds chayiv. And he says the reason is because it's considered a complete avodah because afterwards arranging the evorim on top of that is considered a new series. Now the Gemara goes back to Rav and Levi, just finish off the Sugya, and the Gemara is being a brisa of each one. What was the machlok? Trumas Hadeshin, avodah siluk. Rav says you pater like anything, and Levi says no. And the Zohar, I agree that inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the Heichal over there, I do agree that you pater, but outside the Chol Devar Mizbech, Yichai Vivint for Trumas Hadeshin. Tani give us the Rav. It says that it's not going to say Trumas Adeshin. It's not going to say Beferish not, but it's not going to say Trumas Adeshin. It's going to be silent.
Uh-oh.
Is everybody okay?
Why isn't putting the limbs on
Huh?
in the Avoda?
What is that?
Why isn't putting the limbs on in the Avoda?
I'm sorry, I don't hear.
Why isn't putting the limbs on? Putting the korban itself on in the Avoda. Burning it.
The carbon, yeah, that is an avod. That's going to be Haktorah. Haktorah. Rob said, everyone agreed that Haktorah is Chayiv. There's Zrika, what did I say in the beginning of the Sugya? Zrika, Haktorah, what is that? Zrika, what did Rob say? Arba Avodos, there's Zrika, Haktorah, Nischamayim, Nischamayim. So Haktorah is when
Okay.
you burn carbon. Yeah.
Okay, I missed that. Okay.
Rabbi, right on the dot, I found an answer and a support for your kasha. Look at Tosfos Sanim at the bottom, the end of the second line, Hadlacha Lav Avodahi. It says, Shashilheves Oila Me'elea, Aval Hadsata Halisa Ika Eish Gadol. Aval Tema, and the Tema is the support for your kasha.
It says in the pasuk you need a Kohen. That's the Taim is it says that the Kohen should do it. That's the kasha. But his
Right.
answer, so I don't know. Shalava Solam, but how do you get it to do that? Shalava Solam means after you burn it, you have to make sure that the light is now strong enough that it should continue burning without needing any human support. But you have to light it in order to do that. So okay, I just
Term avoda, there has to be something more, and that's what we're asking. What's the Hagdara?
okay. I don't know. The simple. Of course, we say lighting the menorah is a mitzvah. They say here, no, it's not an avoda. You want to say, I don't see it in the words either, but you want to say that it means that it's not the lighting, it's that it should be lit. Okay, it's a lumdis.
It says
More ends
something.
off with a brush.
Art Scrolls.
Yes, please.
has a note referencing Tosafos Yeshanim Meiri.
Right, that's what we. Yeah.
The Kohen merely holds the flame to the wick, which ignites spontaneously. Since the Kohen
Okay,
serves
but-
merely as an accessory in this procedure, it is not defined as an avoda.
Okay, it's hard for me to understand, especially since the Gemara says by light.
There's another idea, is that the idea of la haloscha. I couldn't come into that. I had somebody here. So a haloscha is not lighting; it's raising up. It means you're putting it in place.
Whatever you have to do, whatever Aaron's supposed to do. So he did it. However you
Right,
make it
but
raising
the
up.
actual
So what-
I understand, but that's a little bit like the idea that the fire came down on its own, that he only had to put it up.
no,
He said,
no,
no,
that doesn't-
haloscha. What is
Why didn't
haloscha?
No. The fire didn't come down by itself. You're talking about the Mizbeach. There's a Ishman Hashemayim. There's no Ishman Hashemayim on the menorah. You light the menorah. They're talking about that. When you light the menorah, so you hold the candle over there and it gets lit. Okay, but that's what you're supposed to do. That's the mitzvah. Why is that called that happened by itself? You have to do it. Okay, there's something very delicate going on that I don't know what it is. And the Gemara expects us to know what it is. Okay, just to finish off. It's early, but just to finish the Gemara, whoever wants to leave. Tanya Kavase de Rav. So in the two prices, we're going to have two prices. One's going to say Trumas Hadeshin. One's not going to say Trumas Hadeshin. That's going to be the whole thing. Tanya give us the Rav. Avodah Shazal Chayv Aleim. The following avodas is a non-coin Chayv Misa if he does them. Chayv Aleim Misa. One is Rikas Adam, which the price continues. Includes also Bein Lefnei, Bein Lefnei, Lefnei. Rikas Adam means on the outside Mizbeach. Also in the inside, inside the Heichal, whatever sprinkling of the blood over there. Also Lefnei, Lefnei, and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, also sprinkling blood over there on Yom Kippur. Hamazah b'chata self. There's also a chata self. That's a sin offering of a bird. Over there, you don't do a regular sprinkling, but you hold on to the bird itself after you slaughtered it, and you shake it in a way that the blood is going to spritz onto the mizbech. That's also called zrika. Also, hamatzah b'makte b'olasot. Hamatzah is also a way of putting the blood onto the mizbech, but it's not with a zrika. It's not with a mazah, but it's mamatzah. Mamatzah means that you squeeze it. You take the bird and you squeeze it against the mizbech after you shechted it, and that's going to cause the blood to come out. And that's also on the way of Zrika. All these things are Zrika. Supposed to know here, Maktir. Maktir is not Tafka Olasof. It's by any kind of a korban. Maktir is Chayiv. Tyson talks about why he says Maktir Olasof. So you have Zrika and you have Maktir, and also Manasseh, Shlosh Lugin Mayim, which is libations, as we said, water or wine. And we said the purpose of the Shlosh Lugin. Actually says the reason is that's the minimum that the Rebbe is going to be Nisuch. Any kind of libation, the minimum is 3 lugim. 3 lugim is about a liter. A lug is about a third of a liter, 345 cc or so. So altogether it's very a liter or so. So this is Rav. What do you see from Rav? Because it doesn't say Trumas Adeshin, from the absence, from the, what do you call it, a thundering silence. It doesn't say Trumas Adeshin. That's a right to Rav, because Avodah Siluk. Tani Kavasa de Levi, that holds Trumas Adeshin, yes. Avodah Shazoch Chayiv Alei Misa, the following, Amer Misadeshin. So we can stop right here, but it goes on further. That's what we're looking for. If this price says that Trumas Adeshin is yes Chayiv, even though it's Avodah Siluk, but in the outside, in the Azara, it's Chayiv in Avodah Siluk. Also, the rest of it, everybody agrees with. Shavazah Shebefnim Shebem Mitzorah, that the Gemara said before, Naman Al also agrees to. There's some chiddush over there that you might think that not, but Gamash one that yes. Rashi says Shebefnim would include Par Elodova, Par Kon Mashiach, and Kippur, all these things that you are chayiv for. Shebem Mitzorah, as we said, that part of the purification process is to sprinkle oil. It's inside the Heichal or outside, doesn't make a difference. You're chayiv for that also. And Amala Gabi Amizbech, Ben Dava Kasha, Ben Dava Pasul. If you bring onto the Mizbeach, this is Aktorah. And here it says a chiddush, we didn't learn about it, Ben Dava Pasul, even if it's possible, but also if the Zar did it, even though it's possible, also he would be chayiv. Rashi points out that pasul, as long as b'di'evet, there are some things that are so pasul that even if you put it onto the Mizbeach, you have to take it off. Then if such kind of thing is not a korban at all, and even the Zor wouldn't be chayiv, he didn't do anything. He didn't the thing.
The last Tosfos claims that the Nakud of all of them is Shahari Kulan Olin Al Gabea Mizbeach.
That's not, I don't think, that's not what we're talking about. I'm just talking about right now that the thing that it says, even Davar Pasul, even a Davar Pasul, that Rashi says only if it's a thing that if you brought it onto the Mizbeach, you don't take it down. You should not have brought it up. But if you brought it, so then you leave it up. This is the Rashi over here. Ben Davar Pasul, only if it's something of b'di'evet, if you brought it up to the Mizbeach, don't take it down. If it's something that's so puzzle that even if you would have brought it up, you have to take it down, then the Zohar also wouldn't be chayiv. What does Tosfos say? Amal al gabi Mizbeach v'dav bakasha b'chal zeh yesh zrika v'azos v'aktoros v'nisach hamayim v'nisach hayayin sh'meikulan al gabi Mizbeach. Tosfos is asking why this brisa doesn't say everything else. This brisa of Levi, it says Trumas Hadeshen and the Shev Azos. It doesn't say all the other things. It doesn't say Zrika, Azor, Torah. Akma doesn't say anything else in the brisa. Now Tosfos says everything's included in things that go on the Mizbeach because it also goes on the Mizbeach. Zrika, going on the Mizbeach doesn't only mean Torah. Tosfos says it doesn't only mean Torah, but it also includes also Zrika. That also goes on the Mizbeach, Nisach Hamayim, Nisach Hayayin, and also go. So that's how he explains everything. Everything's included in this brisa. The main point is that this brisa says openly Trumas Hadeshen, and that's the machlokus. So that's the end of the day today. We're gonna a new sugya starts now, even though there's a few more lines to go, but it's mamash starts a new sugya. So we'll stop here for today. And issues we had three issues. I guess three, mainly three. The first issue was how much Trumas Hadeshen it comes out of komas, which is very, very little, a fistful. Probably took much more, like a panful, whatever, but you don't have to, a shovelful. You only need a fistful. After that, it talks about what are the chiyuvim of a zar, and it comes that everybody agrees to the regular klolim, what the atuma chlobs in. Everybody agrees that in general, he's only chayiv if it was avodas matana. That it means that he placed something, not that he removed something. And the other condition is it should be avodah tama, that it should be the end of a series, not in the middle of a series. And there are two issues to talk about. One is that Levi holds that there's an exception that in the Azara, outside in the courtyard, he's chayiv even if it's avodah siluk, even if it's removing. That's Trumas Hadeshen, machlokes. We pass like Rav, is not chayiv. And the other machlokes is Yochanan says that Shnekes Reitzim is the end of the avodah, and therefore he's chayiv on it. It's called avodah tama. Even though after that you put a vorm on top of it, he says that that's finished. Rav says you put around that also because it's considered a hemshech of the avodah, and you don't finish the avodah of putting on the wood until you put a vorm on top. And therefore, he'd be part of Shnekes Reitzim. I don't recall why you're passing over there, but those were the machlokes. That was the machlokes of Yochanan, Rav, and Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, Yeshikach, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hope everybody's enjoying. I hope the schedule is good for everybody also. The new schedule, if everybody's happy with that, I hope that it's better than it was before. Yeshikach, everybody. Thank you.
We had somebody to fix my refrigerator today, so I had to be here.
Okay. Okay, it should be good. It should be recorded if that helps. It should be recorded if you missed anything.
Thank you. It was the Motzi Shabbat. I have some work, so I might have to rely on the recording.
Okay.
What's the process to get the?